Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. And
Mr. Speaker, can I get a copy?
the clerk will give.
This was the Minnesota House, not the Jerry Springer Show.
We have no idea what's in this bill.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Freshman legislator John Applebaum was there. State Senator Melisa Franzen is ready for the special session.
Hi, I'm Gil Fulbright.
And finally, an honest TV ad for a U.S. Senate candidate. Or is it?
This campaign, it's not about me. It's about crafting a version of me that'll appeal to you.
This is Democratic Visions. Here's Tim O'Brien.
Governor Mark Dayton announced on Tuesday afternoon, May 19, that he will indeed veto the Education Finance Bill, House File 844, that was hammered out by a conference committee and approved by the Minnesota Senate and State House.
I wasn't planning on seeing many of you until March 8th.
A very tired Tom Bach, Senate Majority Leader, spent a few minutes with reporters.
The negotiations between the governor and the Republican-controlled House absolutely stalled. And I found
We welcome for the first time to Democratic Visions Representative John Applebaum. John, good to see you again.
Nice to see you too, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
John, I've seen the video of the final moments of the House session that just took place, or let me say I endured watching the final minutes of the House session. But you were actually on the floor. What was your perspective as that nonsense was going on?
Well, that's right. I had a front row seat, and really it was an education in how government is not supposed to work. It was total chaos and really a disappointing way to finish an incredibly disappointing session.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House.
Your background, John. I know that you represent 44B, part of Minnetonka, part of Plymouth, and Woodland. Is that correct, John?
It is. It's my hometown district. I've lived there all my life. And
Minnetonka boy?
Minnetonka boy. I went to Hopkins High School.
Good.
But was in the Wayzata School District. It's been a lifelong dream of mine to represent my hometown district at the legislature.
And I also know that you succeeded to our friend John Benson's seat when John decided not to run again. Now, you won a very highly competitive primary last year. You won it, and then you went on to win the general election. What were you campaigning on? What were you telling the voters and trying to get them to vote for you in that election? What were your issues?
Well, Tim, living in the area my whole life, I kind of got a sense from talking to my friends, neighbors, community members on what their priorities were, and those are the issues that I focused my campaign on, and that is education, the economy, and transportation. I mean, other issues were important too, but overwhelmingly, those are the three issues I heard the most about, and those were the issues I campaigned on and have tried to work toward now as an elected official.
How did your priorities do in this last legislative session? Now, I know that you were in the minority, and being in the minority is not a very enviable position over at the state legislature. But having said that, tell me about what went on first in education.
I authored an exciting piece of legislation that would offer a $5,000 refundable tax credit on student loan debt for anyone in Minnesota. It was authored with the intent on encouraging people to want to be in Minnesota, continuing their education here and their careers here, because people are leaving more often than they're coming to stay here, and that occurs most frequently with college-age students.
Wait a minute, no, that sounds like it's a reasonable proposal. What happened? Why didn't people embrace that?
Because it cost too much money, they assumed, even though it was completely scalable, which again is disappointing. But the fact is, Tim, and you could apply this to anything, there's a limited amount of money that we have access to in the state budget, and the Republican majority wanted to focus that on their corporate special interests, reducing their taxes, and put the corporate special interests ahead of every other type of need that we have.
And it is incomprehensible that a state tax cuts for millionaires.
Governor Dayton blasted the legislature for its failure to address his number one priority, funding a pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds statewide. What do you think about the governor's position in that regard, and is he right when he takes on the legislature for that?
I fully support the governor's position when it comes to educating our earliest learners. You know, with the $2 billion surplus, the Republican majority in the House was sitting on a golden opportunity to make historic investments in all areas, in particular pre-K, which the governor mentioned all along was his top priority. And they didn't. They would rather spend money on tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires and their corporate donors. And it's really unfortunate that ultimately a $25 million difference in a $42 billion budget is what caused a special session, because Republicans don't care about our earliest learners.
Now, I know you can't get up on a soapbox and tell us what you think is going to happen in the special session, but you're going to be there, and what do you think the outcome is going to be?
Well, I would like to say there is going to be a compromise, but everything we witnessed over the past 5 months suggests that Republicans are completely unwilling to compromise. That's why we don't have a tax bill and we don't have a transportation bill. I would give the legislature an F when it comes to transportation, Tim. Nothing was done because the Republican majority did not present a real plan. They failed to compromise, and they failed to deliver any sort of reasonable solution to fixing our infrastructure throughout the whole state of Minnesota.
The legislative leadership has been quoted as saying, well, we'll deal with transportation next session. Well, next session is an election year. What do you think the prospects are of dealing with transportation on a global basis during an election year?
I think that will not happen.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, so that people aren't going to touch that issue. So this was the opportunity this year to pull together some sort of plan that made sense, and it's gone.
Again, with a $2 billion budget surplus, so many needs could have been addressed. We could have made so many incredible, helpful investments in areas, not just transportation, but all over the place. And the Republican solution is to cut spending around the, across the board, eliminating MinCare of all things, taking 100,000 people off their health insurance. I mean,
the working poor.
Correct. And that's not what Minnesotans want, and it's not a good way to govern, that's for certain.
I had the sense going into the legislative session that this is almost going to be on autopilot. We're sitting on a $2 billion projected surplus, and me and others would have thought that the legislature, working together, could have come to some reasonable utilization of that program, perhaps putting some monies into the rainy day fund, spending more in education. What would you have done if you're the man? You're going to decide how that $2 billion surplus is used. Just in general terms, what do you think it should have been allocated to?
Invest in education, not only the earliest learners that we talked about before, pre-K, but student loan debt and reducing the burdens that so many young people have. I mean, it's inexcusable to me that the Republicans did nothing to address student loan debt and college affordability. I mean, students are going to have to pay more to attend the University of Minnesota and Minskew institutions despite having a $2 billion surplus. The DFL froze tuition with a $627 million deficit, and the Republicans are raising it with a $2 billion surplus.
I mean, I think that's a bombshell. I mean, you got people out there that are going to be indebted for the rest of their lives. They're not going to be able to buy houses. They're not going to be able to raise a family. Something has to be done for them, and I at least like your idea of a place to start.
Exactly. Minnesota has the unfortunate distinction of having the 4th highest student loan debt average of anywhere in the country.
Did not know that.
And that is unsustainable and not what we should be having here in Minnesota.
What about putting some of the projected surplus into the so-called rainy day fund? The economy in Minnesota is cyclical, and we're riding high right now, but tell me what's going to be in 5 years. I'd like to know that. Would you have allocated some more money into that, or do you think we should put it into immediate needs?
I think we should save some in our budget reserves, and we need to have a healthy amount of reserves in order to address those situations. At the same time, I would provide for significant tax decreases for everyday working Minnesota families and not cut taxes on corporations and millionaires and billionaires.
What did House Republican leadership say when you told them of these ideas? They must have had their own preconception as to what they wanted to do, and come hell or high water, they were going to do it.
They have demonstrated that only one issue matters to them, and that is taxes. The Tea Party has taken over the Republican House caucus, and taxes and lowering them for their corporate donors is the only thing they care about. So they're not interested in any of my ideas or my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle's ideas. We got to do a better job in getting people out in 2016 so we can get the majority back. This past election was a record low turnout. It hurt all of Minnesota because of this radical budget that the Republicans attempted to pass. The fact that 4-year-olds and $25 million in a $40 billion plus budget has caused a special session should encourage everyone to go out and vote, because we need a government that can do the right thing and do it on time. You know, a Republican majority has not finished on time since 1999.
Good point, and that leads me to my next and actually concluding question. Give me about a 30-second summary of this legislative session, your first legislative session. Tell me what you think went right, if anything, and what went wrong.
I'm trying to be positive. You know, no one likes a complainer, but not a lot got accomplished this session, Tim, and we had a golden opportunity with a $2 billion surplus to address so many important needs. And the Republicans really left Minnesota kids behind. I mean, they're the biggest losers. Their budget is going to result in student loan debt increases in tuition. Greater Minnesota got left behind with no broadband, realistic broadband help.
What about the rhetoric I heard about how the Republicans are out there to assist the rural areas?
Yeah, well, what they say and what they do are completely different things. There's no meaningful broadband assistance. Rail safety measures were all rejected. Campaign disclosure measures were all rejected. I mean, they're trying to cut people off of their health insurance, $100,000 for Minnesota Care, which thankfully didn't get adopted in the conference committee. What I experienced was just disappointment with how many missed opportunities we had. But at the same time, I am hopeful that the economy is picking up. We're going to have more money to work with and address some of these needs next year, and hopefully we can reflect the priorities of real Minnesotans, not people sitting up in skyscrapers that donate to campaigns.
John, I have to tell you, you're exceedingly articulate and obviously very thoughtful, and
well, thank you.
I want you to keep at it. You know, I know it's hard over there, but you'll be in the majority before you know it, and you'll have a great career. Thanks for stopping by.
I certainly hope so. Thank you for the nice compliment. It's a pleasure to be here.
Our producer, Jeff Strait, suspects you will all really love this.
Hi, I'm Gil Fulbright. The people who run my campaign, they've made this commercial, and I'm in it. This campaign, it's not about me. It's about crafting a version of me that'll appeal to you. A version that visits random work sites with paid actors pointing at things. A version of me that doesn't find old people loathsome or pointless. Has a conventionally attractive yet curiously still family. Listening to my constituents, legislating, these are things I don't do. What I do is spend about 70% of my time raising funds for re-election. I'd do anything to stay in office. My name's Gil Fulbright, but hell, I'll change my name to Phil Goldbright or Bill Fulbright or fill up my mouth with farts. These are the things that are important to me. And these are the fine people that finance my campaign. Now, in order to do these things, I have to stay in office. And to stay in office, I have to keep these guys happy. Now, if any of these things make these guys unhappy, well, my hands are tied. So come November, the choice is clear. Do you want another spineless mouthpiece for special interest and lobbyists, or a spineless mouthpiece for special interest and lobbyists? I'm Philip a mouth with farts, and I approve this message.
You know, if candidates were this honest, we wouldn't vote for them. For more information, visit
represent.us on the web. Represent.us is
a national nonpartisan campaign to sweep big money and corruption out of politics.
Our next guest is our friend, Senator Melisa Franzen. Welcome back to Democratic Visions.
Thank you, Tim. Nice to be here.
Now, Melisa represents Senate District 49, which I know for a fact is Edina, part of Bloomington, part of Minnetonka, and part of Eden Prairie. I know that because it's my district. Melisa, Governor Dayton has already vetoed the education finance bill, and upon further review may put the axe to other bills. What do you think about that?
Well, Tim, it's disappointing that after all the hard work in the last 5 months that we have a first veto right off the gate, but we had a preview that was potentially going to happen. With regard to what the bill entailed, it was the education bill, and the Senate found a compromise with the House that we thought would be agreeable with the governor, and with the investments in early childhood education at $30 million for school readiness programs and $30 million for scholarships. And we thought that would be something that he would be pleased with, but obviously it turned out that he really does want to move forward with the universal pre-K program, and we're going to have to work on that in the next few days, if not months.
What do you think about the universal pre-K program?
I was a signatory of co-author of the bill that came from the get-go in the Senate. One of the first bills was the all-day preschool program, and I co-authored it as well. I believe also that targeted approach might be even a better option with the resources we have now, so that's why I also support scholarships, but I do support the governor's vision of having every child, 4-year-old, be ready for K, so certainly want to support the governor in his efforts. I just thought we could do it in phases.
Now, I don't want you to tell tales out of school, but the clear impression I got was that Representative Doudt and Senator Bach sort of cut a deal as between themselves and expected the governor to go along with it. Do you think I'm missing much there?
Well, no, Tim. We heard the press conference from the governor today, and he alluded to the different tactics and the different offers he had on the table. So there certainly were a lot of different approaches. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but certainly know that it wasn't enough for a consensus to build or support the governor's universal plan. And now we are suffering those consequences. Unfortunately, we're going to have to meet in special session, despite the fact that our Capitol is going to be completely inoperable.
I read your Capitol update, and I can't wait until I see the Capitol update for the close of the legislative session. What's it going to say?
Well, it probably will say it was a strange ending, and certainly as I was driving this morning back home from the adjournment, I felt a bit upset. It took me a while to go back to bed because it was certainly rushed at the end, and it usually is. And certainly I think a lot of the people in the public are pretty upset as well in terms of how it ended up. But we certainly will come back and make it work, and certainly try to bridge those differences between the governor and the House and the Senate.
Now, I've learned over the years that you have a key interest in several different areas, including transportation, education, and perhaps health and human services. Do your committee assignments reflect those interests?
Absolutely. I sit on the Health and Human Services Budget Committee. I'm the vice chair, and that certainly is not an area that we talk about a lot, but it's certainly a huge part of the state budget, and with federal transfers is the largest part of resources that we have to allocate in state government. So I take that work very seriously. I also am on the Transportation and Public Safety Committee, where we missed an opportunity to pass a comprehensive and sustainable funding for transportation and transit and multimodal and all of those great things that we were working so hard, and we thought this would be the year. And finally, in education, I serve on the Higher Ed Committee right now, and we did a great progress to making sure that we are bridging the gap, the skills gap in our workforce.
Let's talk about transportation. Tell us the inside story of why we don't have a comprehensive transportation plan coming out of the legislative session when this was kind of called the transportation session on a go-in basis.
Well, I would say that part of the issue is educating the public on the need, and certainly the allocation of dedicated funds for transportation. So does that mean
get a groundswell going? Because I know there's groups that have been trying to get a groundswell going, haven't they? But they haven't been doing very well at actually getting people involved?
I think they've done a great job. I think they need to continue to work on that, and particularly with the business community. I think they weren't on board with, no pun intended, with trying to dedicate funding for roads and bridges, particularly because there was a big tax bill in the first biennium that I was elected. So I think they're tax exhaustion maybe there with the business community. So I think we need them on board, and we certainly need to continue to educate the public. Our transportation committee did a tour around the state, and I was able to attend some of those visits in Canyon Falls and in Albert Lee. And we did talk to county engineers, and they really showed us what the needs are in their areas and what the dire repercussions of not having new funding. Some places they were actually unpaving roads because it would be easier to maintain. So that's not the direction we want to be. We want to be a top-notch state that attracts millennials and that is accessible for seniors, and we need to think about transportation funding really seriously. And unfortunately, we missed that opportunity this year, and I don't see it happening next year as well.
What was the Republican position relative to transportation?
I think they were open to it, frankly, and we were having those discussions in committee. But at the end of the day, I think it did miss that business community to support it.
You mean push them along?
Push them along and certainly be part of the conversation. It was just plain and simple a tax increase, and that's how it was played out, instead of really investing in our state and investing in infrastructure that's going to better position businesses and the general public. It's a lights-on bill, and I was reluctantly supporting the bill at the end of the day because we need to continue to operate, but it was really painful for me to cast that vote.
What do we give transportation? Not a real good grade? Would that be fair to say? Mediocre. We probably need to get a Democrat-controlled House, don't we, in order to put through a successful transportation plan?
Well, it certainly makes it easier. My first 2 years in office were with the majority, both in the House and the Senate and the governor. And even then it was hard to pass things because we all have differences of opinion and bodies have different priorities. But even then, I think that's the only way to move forward, if we get the majorities back and we're able to really coalesce and really stand behind and strongly behind a transportation package moving forward.
If it was a part of an overall comprehensive plan, do you think that an increase in the wholesale price of gas would make some sense, a tax on the wholesale price of gas?
With including the transit
Yes.
component, it would have to contain it needs to be multimodal, because we're not going to get the support from our rural and metro communities if it doesn't encompass all of the needs of our states.
Let's talk about education. What were you trying to accomplish this session, and what happened?
Well, we did a great increase in early childhood education, even though the bill was just vetoed.
$400 million?
Well, not that much. $60 million in early childhood when you count the school readiness and with the scholarships. But overall, in education, if you also talk about the higher education pot, we put a lot of investments in MNSCU, $100 million, and some funding also for obviously the U. And we also put a project in place, Learn as you earn as you learn, where you actually are able to earn credits as well as an apprentice program that Senator Bonner's proposed project, and we put some funds there. So we're trying innovative ways of not only helping students have affordability in higher ed, but also preparing them for higher ed in the early childhood system all the way through E12.
Did we miss some steps that we should have taken or tried to take?
Targets weren't where we wanted them to be. We heard from our school districts, and I heard this loud and clear, that we needed more funding for the formula. We were able to do a 1.5% the first year, a 2% the second year, but they really wanted, and we're pushing for a 3%.
Really?
So, and that means that some districts will have to have adjustments and potentially cuts in school. So that's a real casualty, I would say, of the education bill. So we missed there.
You alluded to Senator Terry Bonhoeff, a good friend. She has a big-time interest in taking a second look at how teachers are evaluated. It appears to me that while the discussion went on, that policy didn't get very far. That is to say, perhaps go away from the traditional seniority-based layoffs. Is that correct?
That's correct, Tim. I think the issue was a non-starter in the Senate. However, it's a very popular issue, so if you talk to anyone around you and parents who want to make sure they have the best teachers teaching their kids, it's a very popular notion, but at the same time, it's a very complicated issue. It doesn't do it justice to just talk about, last in, first out. So I would say that it was never a real option, and certainly didn't get a lot of discussion at least in the Senate.
I read, and you probably did too, Governor Dayton's rather scathing letter to Representative Doudt explaining why he was going to veto the education finance bill. He said that he was astounded that the legislature only put in like $400 and some million when they had a $2 billion surplus, whereas when we were running a deficit, they put a higher amount, additional sums into education. Is that a valid point?
I think it's a valid point. Certainly, a lot of money was parked and is parked right now, potentially for next session, and we're expecting more to come with the forecast in November. So it happens when you have money around. What do you do with it? Do you put it on the reserves, which I think we should, or do you spend it, which I think we have to invest it? We have to find ways that we get better return on investment for our taxpayer dollars. Education is one area, but it's not just throwing money in education. It's where do you focus, and certainly we have to do the formula, but we also have to look at early childhood education because we know that's the best return on investment in terms of targeting it to those families with and kids that are most at risk.
Our friend Bill Melton, noted economist, questions whether we really have a $2 billion surplus when you take into account inflation.
Well, I think he's right. I think that's something that we all forget, that this number is inflated because it doesn't account for inflation. And there's proposals that Paul Rosenthal in the House and myself have carried to try to fix that, to really give a better picture for the public to understand that this is not that much money. Actually, it's not. It doesn't even get to the $1 billion. So it's certainly inflated, and we need to know that we also have other obligations as well.
Melissa, Health and Human Services, enormous part of the budget. What went on this legislative session in that area?
Tim, the needs of our state in this area are endless, and we were never going to have enough funding to do it all. So we have to prioritize. And we started off, unfortunately, with a House budget proposal that was fake. It came with gimmicks and shifts.
Wait, and with gimmicks and shifts? Are we talking about Tim Pawlenty politics?
Correct. Gimmicks and shifts in a year of a surplus. First of all, they were trying to allocate $300 million in savings from fraud prevention in the health care system.
You got to be kidding me.
And they weren't valid.
Somehow that went right over my head. I probably should have, it sounds like.
It was fake. It was fake money in their budget, and we had to at least start with a real budget. The other piece that they wanted to do on the House side was dismantle Minnesota Care, which is our health care system for the working poor.
Exactly.
And we ended up cutting the system because now we have people between the 150 and 200% of the poverty level paying more in their premiums. So it's very ironic that we talk about, when we talk about health care, we don't want to increase health premiums in the MNsure area, but certainly when it comes to our working poor, that's acceptable for the other side, and it was insisted upon. Despite flaws in that proposal and that budget, at the end of the day, I voted for it because it did benefit more of our children in terms of our child protection investments. We put $52 million there. We also put $138 million in nursing homes, and we took care of issues that we care about, like the Homeless Youth Act that I know our district really is passionate about. We put $2 million there.
Great.
So we did some really good things, but it was a missed opportunity, and certainly we had to really compromise with some of those gimmicks at the end of the day.
Melissa, one of the bills that maybe snuck through was a bill eliminating the political refund credit, which I've always viewed as enabled the little guy to participate in party and political politics. So what happened?
Well, that's correct. The PCR program has been eliminated, unfortunately.
Suspended.
Suspended for now until maybe we get back in control. And a $50 refund would make a difference for people to feel engaged in giving in a political campaign and really having an influence on who gets elected. But now it's gone, and we're going to go back to corporate money and PAC money, and it's going to be out of control, I'm sure, next year.
Speaking of which, already in May of 2015, hit pieces against you have been distributed within Senate District 49 by third parties. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm receiving love letters, is what I call them, of people who are not necessarily in line with what my philosophy or my votes have been.
Well, I know that when you ran for election before, there were glossy brochures that were being printed and distributed.
Expensive glossy brochures. Apparently they're going digital now, so in the computer you probably see, I haven't seen them, but certainly I've heard about being targeted as well via the internet. But I certainly believe in what I am doing on behalf of Minnesotans in my district, and I think at the end of the day, people understand my position and support it as well.
Now I'm going to ask you about a more joyful subject. I know you and your husband Nathan are about to be the proud parent of a newborn son, which I think is tremendous. But I got to ask you this, will we see you in the annual SD 49 4th of July parade?
Probably not walking this year.
That's a good idea.
Most likely
get into one of those convertibles. Huh?
Probably. We'll see what
nice.
happens, but
Great.
we're excited about it.
We're
It's
looking
our
forward
first
to
baby.
seeing you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Democratic Visions is independently crafted by volunteers, mostly Democrats. From Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington,